How can you cut down the amount of sugar in everyday foods and make your diet healthier? In this video, I'll share 5 simple techniques that help lower the sugar content in your everyday meals. This video will be helpful for people with pre-diabetes or diabetes, as well as anyone who cares about their health, wants to lose some weight, or has decided to cut out sugar. Today, we are mostly talking about reducing fast-acting sugars, the kinds of carbohydrates that your body breaks down into glucose very quickly. These sugars aren't just the things that really taste sweet. They also include carbs that rapidly break down in your mouth and gut. For example, starch, found in chips, sauces, and many processed foods, doesn't taste sweet, but it behaves like fast-acting sugar because it starts breaking down into simple sugars right in your mouth. If you've ever chewed on potatoes or bread for a long time, you may notice they start to taste sweet. That's the starch turning into sugar, just in your mouth. The fast-acting sugar breaks down fast, digests fast, absorbs fast, and causes a sharp spike in your blood glucose. When your blood sugar shoots up quickly after eating a specific food, that means the food has a high glycemic index. All foods can be divided into 3 groups: low, medium, and high glycemic index. Foods in the high glycemic index group are best avoided, while foods with a medium glycemic index should be limited. Here you see some examples. Of course, if you haven't eaten for 3 days, for example, you are exhausted, you feel dizzy from hunger, fast-acting sugars are actually the best thing you can take, but in all other situations, they can cause a lot of problems. Sugar absorbs quickly when it's simple, meaning monosaccharides like glucose, fructose, and galactose, or disaccharides like sucrose, maltose, and lactose. It also absorbs faster when the sugar molecules are small and when they are not mixed with fats or proteins, and when there's nothing to slow them down, no fibers to delay breakdown and absorption. And these properties give us the tricks we can use to slow down sugar absorption from food, and as a result, lower the rise in blood glucose after we eat it. So, tip number 1 is about fruits and vegetables. The more raw, unpeeled, and whole your carb-containing foods are, the better. When the plant's natural cell structure is still intact, your digestive system has a harder time accessing, extracting, and breaking down the sugars stored inside each plant cell. The more fiber the plant retains, the slower the sugars enter your bloodstream. Fiber is made of very long, non-digestible carbohydrate chains. It's what gives plant stems their toughness, and it's concentrated in the skin and peel and the cell walls of fruits and vegetables. For example, a potato cooked in its skin has a glycemic index of about 65, while a peeled boiled potato jumps to around 70. Choose potatoes with just softer, thinner skins and roast or boil them just as they are. They turn out very delicious. Baking jacket potatoes is perfectly fine too. For the same reasons, it's best not to turn fruits and vegetables into mush. Eat them whole whenever you can. The finer you chop the fruit, and especially if you turn it into a puree, juice, or smoothie, the more sugar you will absorb from it, simply because you've destroyed the plant's structure. A whole apple with a peel has a GI of 35, while apple juice is around 41. And for controlling blood sugar, fiber really matters. Aim for 35 grams of fiber a day. And finally, the riper the fruit, the more simple sugars it contains. So try to choose fruit that's slightly underripe, or at least just ripe, not overripe. For example, a green banana has a GI of 45, but a ripe banana jumps to 60. Do you see this difference? If you've already picked up something useful by this point and maybe even started questioning whether you really need to finish that brown banana in the fridge, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Knowing how your body works is half the journey to staying healthy. Putting this knowledge into practice truly makes you healthy, which is why I make these videos. The smaller the particles of food, the easier it is for your body to digest them and extract their sugars. Let's take wheat, for example. Whole cooked wheat grains have a glycemic index of 45, rather low. Bulgur, which is still wheat but ground more finely, has a GI of 47. Couscous, even finer, jumps to 65. Semolina is very fine wheat granules, is around 80. And what about wheat flour? It's the highest in this lineup, of course, at 85. Same ingredient, wheat, but completely different effects on your body depending on how finely it's milled. The finer the grind, the more fast sugars you end up absorbing. The same goes for pasta, for example. Instead of very thin noodles or instant noodles that boil almost instantly, choose thicker, denser pasta that takes longer to cook. Your body will extract sugars from those much more slowly. It also applies to oatmeal, for example. The longer it needs to cook, the fewer fast carbs it contains. And by the way, if some supposedly healthy recipe tells you to blend something in a blender, you might want to be cautious, especially if controlling your blood sugar is important for you. Purees, smoothies, or ground up oatmeals may come from perfectly healthy fruits, veggies, or grains, but once they're mashed, they all turn into sources of fast absorbing carbs. Undercooked and reheated foods. Another tip. Think about the taste of raw carrots versus cooked carrots. Or, for example, raw beets versus cooked beets. Cooked vegetables are always sweeter. That's because long carbohydrate chains break down during cooking into shorter sugars, and those taste sweet to us. The more you overcook a starchy food, the more actively this process happens. Of course, undercooked potatoes, for example, aren't tasty, but at the very least, try not to overcook your vegetables. And pasta, that's just slightly undercooked. That's actually considered good practice. The same goes for grains. Don't overcook rice, quinoa, or other cereals. As I mentioned earlier, starch is often very easy to digest. It even starts breaking down in your mouth under the effect of saliva. But not all starch behaves this way. There is something called resistant starch. Starch that escapes digestion because our enzymes simply can't break it down. Here's the interesting part. The regular starch found in grains, bread, vegetables, potatoes, and pasta can turn into resistant starch. This happens naturally after you cook the food, like pasta or rice, then cool it down, better in the fridge, and then eat it cold or reheat it. After this cool, reheat cycle, the amount of fast-absorbing sugars decreases. If you add protein or fat-rich foods to carbohydrate-heavy dishes, you can also lower their glycemic index. For example, adding cheese to baked potatoes lowers the GI of the meal. That's why eating, for example, a bag of bacon-flavored potato chips versus eating an actual baked potato with meat is a huge difference for your blood sugar. It's important to remember that these tricks help reduce sugar absorption, yes, but these strategies can help soften the glucose spikes in your blood. The brine in canned corn, peas, and other canned vegetables or fruits is usually loaded with salt and sugar. Always pour out that liquid and give the contents a quick rinse before eating. Canned vegetables are better than not eating vegetables at all, but they are still not as healthy as fresh, raw veggies. Always read the ingredient list on your food. Just look at it and ask yourself, Does this actually make any sense to me? Could you make something like this in your own kitchen? Would your mom or your grandmom have these ingredients in their pantry shelf? If you need a PhD in chemistry to understand what's going on in that ingredient list, it's not a great product. Complicated ingredient lists usually hide added sugars, salts, calories, and extra fats. I mean, would you ever add something like inverted glucose fructose syrup to your cookie dough? No. An anti-caking agent, a moisture retention agent, stabilizers and emulsifiers, hydrogenated palm oil. Do you keep any of that on the spice shelf between the salt and the bay leaves? Probably not. Products like that are basically chemists trying to recreate the taste and texture of real food, but cheaper. Personally, I'd rather have food that's made in a kitchen, not in a lab. Don't vote for bad products and bad ingredient lists with your money. Your choices affect both your health and which brands stay on the shelves. And yes, I'm assuming the classic advice, don't add table sugar to your food, don't drink sugary soda, and don't eat desserts every day is obvious. So I didn't even mention it here. If you use all the tricks I talked about with veggies and grains, but still snack on candy, well, that's not going to reduce your sugar intake very much, maybe just a tiny bit. If this video was helpful, don't forget to subscribe, and in the comments, tell me which of these tricks you already use, or maybe you have your own. Know yourself better, know what you are eating, and take advantage of your body's life hacks. Now you know how. See you in the next video.